let's say we were a meeting of shareholders and we were examining our company executives. I mean, that's what our enemies do, right? And they're very strict in looking at their performance and examining how they've done. If you think of the Irish trade union movement in those terms, because we're so used to it, we forget just how bad it is in this country. It is really, really bad. And anybody that was thinking in these terms would say, what the hell are we doing being led by such a useless bunch of gits, given the actual record, right? And the record, let me just outline some of the record as follows, right? Pay cuts. There was a survey by the 5th European Survey on Working Conditions. The two places in Europe which have suffered most from pay cuts are Ireland and the Baltic states. Public sector workers, minus 15%, but it wasn't just public sector workers. According to their survey, nearly half of Irish workers took a pay cut in 2010, right? That is a pay cut on basic salary, okay? That has not happened in most of the rest of Europe. I mean, you know, the level, obviously, it varies and so on. Pensions. We had a situation before in the beginning of the summer where the government announced that the state retirement age, effectively with some complexities, is going up to 68. Now remember, at the beginning of the 20th century, Winston Churchill decided, even from a capitalist point of view, you couldn't work people to death. Give them a pension at 70, right? That's the idea, it came in at 70, right? We're in a situation today where, without a whimper from the union movement, people's pensions have been pushed up to 68. We're going back to where Winston Churchill had it in the beginning. And I think we should discuss a lot this at the moment, because I think it's a huge issue across Europe, the issue that Des referred to. Bringing in the idea of a mid-career average pension, getting rid of, if you like, the notion of defined benefits. For example, the pension levy on private sector workers, very important mobilisation by people in Tara Mines. In reality, it amounts to anybody who's lucky enough, if you want to put it in those terms, to have a pension in the private sector, you're down about 10% of your income over the next 4 years. I mean, these are shocking attacks, no resistance from the union leaders in Ireland. The issue of the JLCs and the registered employment agreements, introduced 1948 by a right-wing Fianna Fáil government in the midst of poverty, giving workers, if you like, a premium for Sunday pay. Results, when the Bruton comes out with it, CPSU says we give it a cautious welcome. Unbelievable. You look at, for example, Least Mandate says this is utterly appalling. You look, for example, at what's happening on taxation. On taxation, the last budget took £1.5 billion off PAYE workers through adjusting the tax bands and through introducing the universal social charge. The tax on the corporate sector was £400 million. In other words, the PAYE workers are paying 3 times as much as the corporate sector. Not a word from the union leaders. So if you like, the scale of the retreat in Ireland is far worse than countries in Europe. I mean, I'm not saying the British union bureaucracy are great or anything. Please don't get me wrong from the comrades from Britain. But just even these moderates in Britain at least have called a mass demonstration in June and are calling a massive demonstration, as I understand it, on the 30th of November. And you compare that with what the union leaders are doing in Ireland, you see the absolute scale of the retreat. OK, why has it happened? I mean, Des has touched on it. It's often how you go into a crisis that is actually crucial. And Irish workers went into this crisis after 27 years of social partnership, which had, I think it's important now to say, the enormous damage it done to the union movement. In 1987, at the start of social partnership, nearly 2/3, 61% to be exact, of Irish workers were members of a union. In the last survey done by the Central Statistics Office in 2007, that had declined to 1/3. So we've gone from a 2/3 union membership to a 1/3 union membership. Enormous decline in those years. Worse amongst young workers. Only about 20% of young workers in a union. Declining numbers amongst manual workers at the moment. Huge declines in the private sector. 20% of the private sector now is organised. So social partnership has been a disaster in terms of the unions. But not just on the numbers. What social partnership did is it got the union leaders to dovetail the policy of the labour movement with the policy of the government. 2 examples. The issue of working mothers. The fact that, for example, there's a huge change in Irish society. There was a need for example, childcare. The policy of the Irish trade union movement was not to demand proper childcare facilities. It was to demand tax relief to, if you like, pay for your childcare costs, fitting in with the Fianna Fáil agenda. The issue of public-private partnerships. Taken as normal in Britain that you'd oppose public-private partnerships. The Irish trade union movement are for public-private partnerships. And when some people in my union, CPSU, were, if you like, showing a bit of reluctance about it, were brought in and told the line why you have to be for public-private partnerships. So social partnership led to a situation where the policy of the unions was dovetailed with that of the government and the state. And lastly, social partnership in the union led to a complete collapse of union activism, where, if you like, small layers of people become the committee of the union, and where, in fact, if you like, people think the union is the committee, and it's almost like an insurance policy. So that's the situation we found ourselves in. And given all that, we enter the biggest crisis, one of the biggest crises, economic crises in the Western world, equivalent in scale to the collapse of Indonesia in 1997, or for that matter, the Wall Street crash of 1929 in terms of its scale, just in this particular country at least. The context, therefore, where we need to look at the question of what would a different union movement look like, and what are we actually trying to achieve here? Because I think we should not be under any illusion. There's huge demoralisation in the unions. This is not going to be solved instantly, but we do need very clearly a strategy of beginning to bring about change in the unions. Now I want to really outline 5, I think, main issues I think we need to address in terms of the unions and popularise over the next period. The first is we have to raise the issue of changing the leadership, right? That's very, very crucial. The biggest reason in my job why people were reluctant to come out and strike against pay cuts is they thought the people who were leading them are utterly useless and were not serious about the fight. And that's the general mood of people. You look at the mass booing of David Begg and the mass booing of Jack O'Connor, right? They think it was stirred up by a few subversives. That's how they tell us in CPSU. It was mass, spontaneous booing. The left, if you like, in many ways, didn't even get near the platform because we were so far back. So this was a mass, spontaneous booing. Now, you cannot have a fight if you have people running the union leadership of the union who've served, like David Begg did, on the board of the central bank, turned a blind eye to all the shenanigans, and then ask workers to, if you like, have confidence these people are going to lead a fight. So anything we do has to be premised on saying absolutely openly, we want rid of these people, and nothing useful is going to happen until that process begins to build up to a big momentum in the union. And it's not just the leadership at the top. We have to face reality. The reality is that these people have promoted a terrible mood of defeatism. The message in CPSU constantly is, sure, it could be worse. You got a 2% pay rise. You could have got a 1% pay rise. You got a 15% pay cut. Sure, it could be 20% pay cut. Yes, that's the mood, constantly promoted, of defeatism in the union movement. And what that has produced has been layers of shop stewards and section committees who reflect that mood and who often are not people who want to stir up a fight. And therefore, when we talk about changing leadership, we're also talking about changing leadership at local level. And crucial for anybody, I think, at this conference is to set out openly to remove the time servers, to remove the hacks, the union loyalists, the loyalists, as I call it, for Liberty Hall in my case, get them off committees and replace them with people who want to fight. Secondly, we have to talk openly about the democratic deficit, if you want to put it in those terms, the lack of democracy in the unions. I'm going to a CPSU conference on Monday. The CPSU has been reorganised. There are 21 sectors of CPSU. 21 of 21 sectors are nominating Jack O'Connor and Patricia King to be the new leaders of CPSU. Now, you know, Stalin's Russia, he always made sure there was at least a 4% minority. But the CPSU control 100% of 100% of the sections are nominating a leader who is members of my section committee unanimously vote against him. And I'm talking people of different political traditions, right? There is an enormous deficit, right? The members in CPSU are not allowed to vote for the union leaders. The committees in CPSU, sector committees, my sector committee has 12 people elected by a meeting of 30 people who are supposed to represent 6,000 people. There is a complete and utter disconnect between the official union structures and actually the members of the union. Therefore, we have to talk very clearly about electing people to union positions, of having them on the average pay, and crucially, having the right to recall people. How you present that argument, we can discuss in different unions, but the notion that you can put somebody up and they're in there for 5 years, and if you like, put in business terms, if you like, and their performance is absolutely woeful, and we're still stuck with these people, it doesn't make sense in terms of the union movement. Thirdly, I think we have to advocate a strategy of national resistance. And here it's important, I think, to understand that in a period where workers have been defeated, it is unlikely that we will rerun the movie in terms of how militancy developed in the past. In the 1960s, in a period of boom, very strong shop stewards committees were built up, and those shop stewards committees, for example, in the 1970s, were able to take unofficial industrial action. In the mid-1970s in Ireland, 75% to 80% of strikes were unofficial in this country. There was a strong, vibrant shop stewards movement at workplace level. This recession, I think, is going to last for 5 or certainly 10 years, certainly low growth over the next period. It is unlikely that we will simply accumulate strength at local workplaces. I'm all for trying, of course. But the reality is, in order to re-galvanise the movement, there is going to have to be a national coordinated action. And that is the pattern across Europe. If you look at the unions in Greece, you look at the unions in Britain, which has been a bit of a pick-up, it is the national movement. The fact that people come out all together on the 30th of June or on the 30th of November, that, if you like, the pressure is building up from below, so it's become respectable in British unions to talk about civil disobedience. Remember that poor man from TU who dared to mention it in Ireland? It's become a respectable part of the British union movement to talk about national civil disobedience. Therefore, we have to have a strategy of focusing on a number of defensive battles and pushing for those battles in order to produce national resistance. I happen to believe one of the crucial, and this is the pattern generally, one of the crucial issues is the question of pensions. I think we should discuss it later, but as I understand it, the teachers' unions, fair play to them in this instance, are calling a protest on Wednesday over the enormous attack coming on people on pensions. And it's not just the public sector. Once they get it through there, the idea of a mid-career average, of, if you like, you taking responsibility for your own pensions, it'll spread right throughout the private sector. We have to popularise that and build that up into a national movement and ask the question, why is it that across in Northern Ireland, I see one of the union people from Northern Ireland here, why is it in Northern Ireland there is action on the question of pensions, but down over here the union leaders are saying nothing? Not a word said about, if you like, increasing the retirement age. So I think we do need a strategy of pressing for national resistance on a number of key issues that start off on a defensive basis, but, if you like, can also, if you like, help to re-galvanise the movement and can give confidence to people at workplace level. Fourth, we need to redevelop the idea of workplace trade unionism. Because I think that when you actually look at what's happening at a workplace, unless there's a certain vibrancy from the grassroots, no matter how strong the left is in winning positions on committees, in winning national leadership, if you haven't got a vibrant trade union movement at your workplace, that is actually building on sand. And what do we mean by this? We mean very basic things at the moment. We mean that a union official should not be let go in to talk to a manager without being accompanied by a shop steward. Very basic. Except I hear in my union, the union official picks whichever hack he or she wants to go in to talk to management. Should not be allowed. No shop steward should ever be allowed to have a drink, take a free drink off the management at Christmas. You might think that's small, except if you take the free drinks at Christmas, you won't be arguing against the management in January. Very, very simple stuff, right? You need to have workplace meetings that after every single, what they always try to do to you as a shop steward, come in here and how do you sell it to your members? I never sell anything to my members. I'm not a bloody salesman. I'm not here to sell anything from the point of view of the company. It's about going back to the members, reporting honestly and openly. This is the balance of forces, making an argument, and sometimes you may lose an argument, but that tradition of workplace meetings has to be at the core of a different type of trade unionism. And that is hugely important here in a situation where many people have come to think the union is just a committee, the group of hacks running the union and so on. We have to change that tradition in order to bring it back to workplace trade unionism. And lastly, we have to deal with the political issue. The three leaders of CPSU are all members of the Labour Party. Nobody's done a survey, but I would suspect about 70% of union officials in CPSU are members of the Labour Party. To quote one, I have to use an unnamed official who used to be in Sinn Féin, if you want to go anywhere in CPSU, you join the Labour Party. That's the understanding. It's completely run by the Labour Party. And in that situation, you ask, why is it they did not come out and slam Burton, because they're dovetailing with what Gilmore and Rabbitte want. You cannot have a serious union movement if you have a situation where your union officials are locked into regular discussions with government ministers who are implementing the policy of the cuts. And therefore, the political levy in SIPTU, I'm talking about SIPTU particularly here, but it applies to a lot of other workers' unions, I think. The political levy in SIPTU, which 95% is used to pay Labour Party people in campaigns, that has to be questioned. And we have to talk very openly about breaking the link with the Labour Party. The Labour Party is attacking workers. They should not have the automatic right to win to have the political allegiance to workers. At the very least, any political fund, any party that wants to apply to a workers' movement for support politically has to present a case rather than simply assuming you're just going to get it automatically. And I think, therefore, highlighting the question of the link with the Labour Party is hugely important in the trade union movement. OK, I think there is, just lastly to say, I think despite the difficulties, there are huge possibilities of change at the moment. It's not going to happen immediately. I'm part of a new network called Change SIPTU. We had 40 people turning up to a Change SIPTU meeting in Cork yesterday. The atmosphere is one of tremendous anger against the union leaders, but it's a question of linking that anger to a very clear strategy and posing a different type of union movement as an alternative to what's going on at the moment.
Thanks very much, Kieran.